In this lecture, we'll be beginning to look at form, mass, volume, and some more of the visual elements. So typically form is used when describing the 3D works. So here a sculpture piece from the Olmec culture from Mexico. Essentially these little figures with some type of architectural type stones around them. So when we talk about form, typically we're talking about 3D pieces. Then volume refers to, the mass or the bulk of an object. How much volume does it take up, or how much space does it contain? So the massive Hindu temple from Angkor Wat in Cambodia, massive amount of space that this building takes up. Actually, I think it's more of a series of buildings, making up one gigantic building, one gigantic structure. So we would refer to the volume or the space that it takes up. And same with mass. How much mass does it have? The bulkiness. Again, some of the language used in the terminology for talking about 3D pieces. So the Church of St. George in Ethiopia. So this particular church there's a series of churches where these were carved out of the volcanic rock. Volcanic rock is pretty soft and easily manipulated, easily carved. So in Ethiopia, they basically starting from the roof, carving from the top of the building down to the bottom. There's a whole series of these churches in this area of Ethiopia. So they have this, going back to the terminology, they have mass, they take up space. It's something that you could measure basically. So the 2D world, where everything is a flat surface, the picture plane is a flat surface. For the most part. So it is referred to as implied mass. We talked about shading and modeling with the hatching and cross-hatching, describing it as a way to create the believable image that you're looking at a 3D object, although you're really looking at a flat surface. So here we have the Mark Tansey painting, where essentially all these famous sculptures from around the world end up in a giant trash heap. So it's the implied mass that's sort of selling you on the idea that is this massive pile of sculptures, when in all reality it's just a flat surface. So another one of the elements is texture. So we're all pretty familiar with texture, how things feel. And so we have actual texture. If you were allowed to, handle the artwork, you could, feel in this case, the ridges on the carved piece. As well as the wood, all of it has a type of texture that you can feel and touch. And then the 2D world, getting into the visual texture, where the Rachel Ruysch is sort of giving you enough visual information that it would be, believable if you could, reach out and actually touch uh, parts of this still life painting. The soft, delicate treatment she has in the flowers, and if you look at the leaves, they have little veins and ridges, so that she's giving you all this visual information that it's, believable, and we understand what we're looking at. You can see the texture of the leaves and the delicate texture of the flower petals. And subversive textures, when an artist decides to play with your preconceived ideas of what these objects are. So a Mary Oppenheimer object, where she took a cup, saucer, and spoon and covered them in rabbit fur. So for her, it was this idea, this way to, make these cold, sterile, mundane object, to make them sort of sensual and precious, so that you want to touch them. It's, going completely against, like I said, her, preconceived notion of what a cup, saucer, and spoon, how they typically feel. So, wrapping it in this fur and completely transforming, what we're looking at, and us maybe wanting to have a different interaction with it. Maybe you want to pet it, you want to cuddle it, or you might think that's, disgusting, strange, and weird. Another, time and motion. So part of this, because of the ever-changing technology and things that artists will play with, actual motion, kinetic art, that is still part of the things why we keep adding to the elements, having different types of motors, or wind driven, all these different ways to make something move. So the example here, the Alexander Calder, one of his mobiles, where it catches the air current from inside the building, in this case, the AC system, where they typically will hang these so that some air will flow to it, and it moves around and it sort of comes to life. So part of the actual idea, what Calder would want, is the actual movement of the piece, not just a static piece. So the implied motion, often as I describe, when you're watching something, you hit pause, and if you hit pause at the right time when someone's jumping, or some type of motion that they're doing, and you freeze it. So that's the implied motion. It's believable that there's movement to the statue, that if we could unpause, then the statue would come to life. So the implied motion. The illusion of motion, where you get the blurring effect of something, where you're trying to take a picture of something that is moving and it gets blurry. So that's that illusion of motion. When you try to look at something moving fast in front of you, it's blurry and fuzzy. So same thing with the photography. It has the capability of showing the illusion, showing that motion by the objects being blurred. So here's another example, Thomas Eakins' man pole vaulting, where this poor gentleman had to sit there and pole vault, what is there, like 12, 13 times, and each time he was doing this little pole vaulting act, Eakins was taking a picture of it, and certain cameras where you're able to do these multiple exposures, so that each time this guy is doing a little pole vaulting, Eakins would take a picture when he's sort of in a different position of the pole vaulting. And then the op art, while technically op art is not an element, op art does play with the way we see things. So that the color combination that's being used, the sort of wave pattern, these things put together, the certain distance in between the negative, or the white space in between. The longer you look at the Bridget Riley, the more sort of chaos it's going to cause on your eyes, and it starts to short circuit and overload your brain. So you get this after image where you start seeing actual sort of movement and crazy stuff that's going on, even though technically this is a static image. You get these weird blurring and fuzzy movement sensation, the longer you look at this piece. So Ross Bleckner, also playing with the idea, but sort of I like his work because he's playing with some of the ideas of the Bridget Riley, but he feels that we've become too lazy to stare at the Bridget Riley type painting too long, so he decides to give you the after image. So then you start seeing the little fuzzy, weird, strange colors in the paintings. Well, in his, are actually there. The fun part about some of his paintings, you can kind of see that look a little more like kind of black, very sort of pronounced black dots or specks. If you're to see the actual Ross Bleckner's in person, and you get real close and you look up close, some of the little black dots or specks are actually like little butterflies or little insects and things like that. So he puts all these little crazy, funny little things in his paintings. So that is it for this set of the elements.